Thank you so much for coming, everyone. Welcome to our Connect event, How to Find the Right Volunteers. I would love to begin by acknowledging the Darug Nation and people as the traditional custodians of country that I'm joining this webinar from. We would also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and recognise their continuing connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging and extend that respect to all First Nations people here today. It is such a pleasure to have you all here. Some of you have returned and this is actually the first installment of a 3-part series. So we've run this series before. So you may have caught maybe the final one or the second one or just the first one, but we're running the whole series again because there was a lot of how do we get all the information from start to finish, because we're really going through how particularly volunteer managers and not-for-profits in general can be working with volunteers. Right from the start today, we're talking about finding the right volunteer and setting up that relationship all the way through to recognition and rewarding your volunteers. So we will be running that throughout right up to the end of the year in December. So we'd love to see you back again. But let's kick off the first one in our series. I thought the reason we started this series in the first place is because volunteers, they're vital to our not-for-profit ecosystem. We work with not-for-profits around Australia and with volunteers, and we're a bit of a conduit, so we work closely with both sides and kind of hear the struggles from each side and the joys from each side. So we're really passionate about volunteering and how volunteers can really contribute to your organization. Not-for-profits, I guess, play such a large part in Australia as well. In 2013, they employed 10% of the workforce and then also engaged 4 million volunteers. Like, it's such a huge part, particularly in Australia. So we want to make sure we're doing this right. And we want to make sure that we're forming a community where we can support each other and where we can lean on each other's knowledge and wisdom. As my dad said, why make the same mistake twice? If we can make the mistake and teach someone else not how to make that mistake, then that would be awesome. So that's our goal here today and for the rest of the series. Just a quick agenda, just an overview of what we'll be doing today. I realize I haven't even introduced myself, but I've heard a lot of your names already. But we'll be going through the introductions. We'll be going through what do we mean by the right volunteer? Very clear quotation marks there. There's the pitch, online volunteer management, and we'll have a Q&A section at the end. So feel free to pop questions in the chat as we go along. Okay, let's discover our collective wisdom. If you want to pop this in the chat, you can. If you want to unmute, you can. But maybe I'll start by introducing my good friend Raj, who's here today. So Raj is our fearless leader of our not-for-profits. I've never used that word before. He's our wise sage. He runs our consultations. So if you're coming onto our platform, if you're looking for volunteers, either Raj or one of his consultants actually sit down with you and chat through your business decisions, what's going on with your not-for-profit, how can volunteers help you best, particularly in this area of skilled volunteering, virtual volunteering, areas you may not have even considered before. So he has a lot of experience in the not-for-profit industry. He loves to chat and hear about what you're up to, what you're doing, and how we can utilize volunteers to help. And that's just a free service by joining Communiteer. That's just one of those conversations that you get set up with, and you would meet Raj along the way. And he's brought all of that knowledge and wisdom into today's session. That's who Raj is.
Cool, thank you, Will. So I take it I'll be introducing you then. So Will is the person you actually meet after the consultations. So he and his team actually are the ones who will get you on board onto our platform, make sure you're comfortable and know how to use the platform effectively. He has actually onboarded and now is helping somewhere around 300 not-for-profits on the platform. So it's amazing and he learns a lot from them. And part of his role is actually helping you find the volunteers, the right volunteer for the opportunities that you have. He also teaches the not-for-profits how to make sure you scope the projects properly. And if you have trouble finding them, what he does is he actually makes sure that he reaches out to the corporate sector to bring in the volunteers. He actually has events with the corporate volunteers as well. So we've got like Match to Impact and story circles where he tells the stories of the different not-for-profits, their causes, what they're doing to the corporate sector as well, and brings in the volunteers to help you guys out. So he has learned so much from both the volunteer side as well as from the not-for-profit side. So whenever you are stuck on a project of figuring out how to get your volunteers excited, he's the guy to talk to because he just knows how to spur them on.
I'm just glorified tech support, really. Thanks for joining us. We would love to hear a bit more about who's here today. So yeah, if you want to answer a couple of these questions, we'd love to hear what organization are you from, what's your role there, what would you like to get out of today's session? Pop it in the chat, unmute, let us know. Who are you and why are you here?
Yeah, I know we've got a few people that are joining us and we know a bit more about them as well. People like Ida and Jenny and all that we've seen them quite a few times, I think.
I'm happy to go. Aurelia from Launch Housing. We're a housing and homelessness support agency in Melbourne. We have about 14 sites in the greater Melbourne area and volunteers across 10 of them, mainly in client support roles. I've been with the organization for about 2 years now as a volunteer coordinator, and some of the roles are really incredible in being really innovative of using volunteers to help support teams and staff. It's just more of the internal stuff, like getting them on board, aligned with the national volunteering standards, and even some of the compliance stuff where historically the organization across different sites hasn't been on board. So it's been a bit of a change management exercise over the last 2 years. While I've been in the volunteer coordination space for almost 8 years now, it's been a challenge trying to get staff on board, understanding, well, some understand the value of it, but understanding how to support and protect them as well, and also considering them alongside staff as not as employees, but as unpaid workers. So I think I attended your last session and just trying to get some of the information that might seem basic for some of us, but I just it's helping me along with how to continue sending that message across to staff who aren't used to managing volunteers or still have that old school way of thinking of volunteers as people just with extra time rather than skilled in their own experiences and background.
Definitely. And it's good to see that, yeah, there's a lot of people here who are bringing on staff and bringing on volunteers. The way we look at it is a volunteer is actually extra staff as well. Try and figure out how we can use them to boost the resources that we do not have and complement what we're doing. So that's what this whole session is about. So it's good to see, yeah, we've got quite a few returnees, familiar names, and yeah, we'd love to see what you guys are wanting to get out of this session as well, and we'll try and address it throughout this whole session. Right now, I think what we've got to do is get on to the next slide because we're running a bit behind our time, I think, as what Olivia is trying to tell me. So one of the main things, why do you want to engage volunteers? Now, there are many reasons to do that. And some of you all already experienced and know exactly what you want out of the volunteers. But what I'm trying to do is basically explore different ways you can use volunteers and bring them into the fold. So the most common thing is actually labor, right? It's whether it's manual, skilled, or role. So manual, we've even had people ask for gardeners, and we actually managed to get someone coming on a regular basis for a center to do their gardening. So it can be as simple as that, a hobby that someone wants to do. But where we would like to bring in more people is on the skilled and the role-based volunteers. And when I talk about skilled, I always talk about, look, we've got a whole lot of corporates that really want to send their people out to volunteer. And the reason they join Communiteer is actually because they want to increase their volunteer rates. So what they've done is they've actually given the volunteers a lot of support from the management to complete projects with the not-for-profits. The way to look at it is, if I need someone to help me with marketing, IT, finance, HR, so even things like what you brought up about the regulations, the policies and stuff like that, what we've done is actually gotten HR people to come in, look at the policies that are around recruitment of the volunteers, even their induction program and stuff like that. And that way, what happens is that you can actually get them to come up with all the policies and compliance things that you need, and even get them to come up with the program. So look at that as a way to bring in. It can be short term, it can be long term. So if I give the example of marketing, you can bring in a couple of people from different corporates through this platform. And what happens is that they can come up with a marketing strategy for the next 3 to 5 years. And you can do that for any other department as well. And then from that, you find, okay, maybe I now know what my target market is and which channels I should use. For example, if I'm hitting the older people, then you tend to hit Facebook more. And then I can ask for a role-based volunteer that focuses on the Facebook side of things. And that person might come in once a week for 2 hours or something like that, and contribute to you on a longer term basis. The second type of volunteering is your mentor consultant. So these are people who can come in and be a sounding board to your strategy, your ideas. I always say it's also part of your people development, because a lot of time with not-for-profits, you're not getting enough training resources for the staff that you have, right? So think of it as, look, I take someone more senior in terms of that marketing example, for example, get someone in to just be a mentor to your current marketing team, and give them ideas, give them training, give them new concepts that are out there in the world, especially in the corporate sector where we're trying to learn a lot from. The other thing you can use these mentors and consultants is for the board as well. I know a lot of not-for-profits, the board members might be heading different committees, and it doesn't hurt to bring in someone from the corporate sector to help the board think of these strategies that you have as well. The third type is the knowledge, your subject matter expert. So for example, we've had a not-for-profit actually ask us for help in terms of getting a CRM system. So what they wanted was a volunteer to come in, analyze the different CRM systems out there and see which is the best match to the current need that they have. So the volunteer came in, he actually went through what their needs were, went out to the market, found out what the different platforms were out there and see what was the best fit for them. When the project ended, he decided he will carry on. So what he did was he actually implemented the CRM system. He then trained the staff to make sure they knew how to use the CRM system to the most effective they could use it at. And then he keeps on checking back with them. So he, from a project-based volunteer, he became a role-based volunteer. So these are things you can think about. What is it that I need? And then put it out there. And then you can come and talk to someone like Will, who will get the right volunteer for you on the platform as well. Okay. I know someone raised the question about fundraising before. And this is something that it can be a project. You bring in business development people to help you with the fundraising. But what a lot of people don't realize is your individual donors are what you're trying to get from your volunteers as well. There's a lot of giving sites out there, like Good to Give, for example. And a lot of researchers have found that when you have your individual donors giving you some donations and stuff like that, but if you get them to volunteer with you, that donation actually doubles. So the thing is to get your donors involved with your community. The more they get involved, then you find what's going to happen is that they're going to give a lot more because they understand the cause a lot more. They've seen the beneficiaries. They know where they can help. The second thing that your volunteers can do is actually bring in a corporate sponsor. A lot of times when you have an individual donor who's really into your cause, they can go back to the company and go, hey, I would like to champion this not-for-profit and change who we are supporting in terms of being a sponsor. And you'll find a lot of corporates out there will listen to their volunteers or their staff, especially their top volunteers. And if we can show, look, these are your top volunteers, this is where they're volunteering, you'll find the corporate will also tend to then shift their policies towards where their employees are more interested in helping as well, because that's where they're going to get a lot more traction. So developing them into your champions back to the corporate is something very important in terms of how you engage your volunteers as well. And we'll be going through how you can actually, engage your volunteers a lot more bit in this segment, but especially in segment number 2, which is coming up on the 10th of November, I believe. Something that we don't do a lot with the volunteers is how to use them to build awareness and to use them for marketing. And this should be part of the, when you bring them on, part of your session is you tell them, look, I know you're coming into the finance project or an IT project, or help me in feeding the wildlife, for example. But part of the induction is, look, we are on Facebook, we are on LinkedIn, join us on that. Give us a link. These are important things that are coming up. Can you share these events for us? There's a lot more that they can do to spread the awareness, right? And if they believe in your cause, that's what they're going to do. They're going to follow you and then like your post as well. Corporate engagement is very important, and I did cover that before. They want to increase the volunteerism right now. I know someone asked about, how do we get more volunteers, seeing that more people are working longer hours? The thing is, a lot of corporates are approaching us because they want their staff to do a lot more volunteering. And they're behind their staff doing this volunteering as well. So that engagement with the corporate is very important. And on this platform, what you'll find is there's a lot of collaboration you can do with all the corporates on the platform as well and bring them in. And with your current corporate partners, you can bring them onto the platform as well. And we can teach you how to collaborate with them a lot better and build that relationship. And the whole idea of all of this is to increase your supporter base. At the end of the day, I'm not just looking at, hey, I'm bringing in a volunteer. I'm actually going to bring in a supporter, someone who's going to believe in my cause and do whatever it takes to make sure this cause is a success. Okay. We'll talk a lot more about all these things going forward as well. But right now, what I'd like to do is do a poll and see where it is that you guys feel you want to engage your volunteers more. So that poll should be up there with you right now. And we'll wait for the results of that. Okay, do we have the results for that, Olivia?
It'll come in a little bit. Just give us one more second.
I'm always thinking, it doesn't take too long to click.
You got to think about it sometimes.
That is true. I don't think a lot.
Oh, good. I think we're ready to go.
There we go. So the labor part of it seems to be the most, the biggest need. And that's a good need, because then it really shows that you're engaging with the volunteers on a level where they can actually contribute a lot more to you as well. And then from there, you can actually develop the fundraising, the awareness, the corporate engagement and stuff like that as well. And if you're looking at that part of it, then always think about how do I engage the volunteers in terms of the manual skilled and role-based volunteers as well, because that's where you're going to build the relationship with the volunteers. So we go into the next section, which was what were you looking for already? We've done kind of that. The pitch. So when you're looking at getting a volunteer into your organization, how do you treat that? And I had a good conversation with someone before, and I said, look, you've got to treat the volunteer as well as you treat your staff. And recruiting them has got to be exactly the same process. And that person actually turned around and told me, no, you don't treat them as well as your staff. You actually got to treat them better than your staff. Because what we don't realize is that all these volunteers are coming in and they're sacrificing their time and their resources and their abilities without getting a salary. So think about it as, look, if I'm going to engage with volunteers, I've got to treat them not as volunteers or not as a resource, but more as someone I'm trying to get into the organization on a longer term basis. And that starts with the advertisement. So the advertisement that you put out has got to be of similar quality to what you put out for your staff. You got to have a proper job description. You got to tell them exactly what is needed, what the criteria are, what the role is going to take from them, how many hours a week. And when you do that job description, bear in mind they are volunteers, so don't go about giving them tasks that is impossible to do, because they're actually sacrificing a bit of their time, and it's not a full-time job or a part-time job. So make sure that it's something that will attract them, because if you give something that's too hard to do, a volunteer is going to drop out going, look, I can't do this. The skills that are needed here is something I can't take on, right? You need a proper induction and training. And this is something you can actually get a volunteer in to come up with in the first place, to develop your induction and training. But with every person that comes in as a volunteer, you must have that proper session with them. They need to know who you are, what the cause is about, what your objectives are, what is your value proposition. Because in order for me to join any company, I would like to know who they are. And if you look at the corporate sector, if I'm going to join, let's say, Nestle or Westpac or something like that, I need to know who they are and who am I joining. Are these values aligned to what is aligned to me? Who is this company about? Are they, someone who's going to stay for the long term? Are they someone who's going to treat me well? Do they have good policies around different things, right? So all that is very important. Now, in terms of induction, I need to know what resources I have within the organization. Who can I turn to for help if I need support in different things? Is there a contact person within the organization that I can always turn to? Is there a support structure within the organization for volunteers? All that sort of thing is very important to a volunteer. Bear in mind, they're coming in fresh, they're coming in without knowing what to expect. They might not know what the not-for-profit sector is like, and sometimes you got to teach them that too. One thing we always found is coming from the corporate sector, they expect things to be happening very fast. So like a project given to them, sometimes they think, okay, we can do this in 2 weeks. But we all know when it is done in the corporate sector, there's a lot more resources, there's a lot more that goes into a project. Well, when you talk about not-for-profits, we don't have the same resources. So our expectations are different. So to a corporate, 2 weeks will take, will be more than enough to complete this project. But in a not-for-profit, it might take 6 weeks, simply because we don't have the same structure as a corporate. So all that kind of thing is part of the training that you give to the volunteer as well. Your brand is very important. So a lot of times when we market, we just market, look, this is the role, this is what we want you to do. But we forget to bring in the reason why they should volunteer. And the reason they should volunteer is because of the cause that you are trying to help out in and the beneficiaries that you are trying to help. A lot of the volunteers want to figure out, okay, yes, I'm doing an IT project. Yeah, I'm doing an accounting project. But how am I actually benefiting the not-for-profit? How am I making an impact to people's lives? And that's something that you've got to think about. Because at the end of the day, I'm going to volunteer because I'm going to make that impact to someone, and not because I can do an accounting project for you. So you got to think about, hey, how do I put that forward? And your brand is really your cause and your beneficiaries, and the impact they're going to make. And we always try and sort of give them that assurance throughout their whole project that, look, the impact they're making, even though it's not direct, we can see that impact, and how they're going to contribute towards that impact is very important. And that goes into the why as well. Why are they doing this? And part of it is also figuring out why they want to volunteer. Is there something that we can do for them? Are there skills that they are trying to develop? Is there something that they want to get out of this? And you got to try and figure out for different volunteers, how is it that I'm going to get something from them, but how is it they're going to get something from me? It's got to be a two-way sort of thing, right? So in the interviews and all that, try and figure out, okay, why is it that they're trying to volunteer for you? Try and give them something back as well, and then they'll come back. Okay. And I believe Will now has got a few examples to show us, how these kind of things can impact a volunteer and their experience.
Yeah, thanks, Raj. Yeah, I thought we could take a look at a couple of case studies, or even have a think about what each of those aspects actually means, and what can that look like, particularly right now where we're in lockdown. We've had a lot of virtual online volunteering, but as the lockdown restrictions ease, and as we move in and out of this kind of hybrid model, what does this look like, and how can we learn from these? So I just wanted to give a quick heads up. So with a couple of these examples, we do have a not-for-profit in foster care and another in suicide prevention and mental health. So if either of those topics would make you feel uncomfortable, feel free to duck off as you need to. Now, first one is virtual volunteering admin support. Bernardo's Australia, a relatively well-known brand. And my only note for this one was what's the KISS model? Keep it simple, stupid. It's not an entirely complex opportunity. They just wanted some. I think this would be similar to a few of you in that looking for some either manual labor, data administration, that really administrative heavy tasks that someone can actually pick up and do and actually take time off your plate. So that's what we're looking for here. And this one was actually quite popular. So when I took this screenshot, there were only 3 volunteers, which is still pretty good. But then more continued to join, and we had to kind of close it off and say we don't need this much support. So all they've done is really, they've upped the size and bolded what they do. So they've really focused on what does Bernardo's do? This is what we're looking for. So this is really on the short ends. This is what we're looking for. This is what we're doing. And volunteers could really resonate with that and jump on board. So that kind of, does it have to be a full-blown job description where you kind of who you're reporting to, this and that? It's not really, but what we're really trying to do is get that this is what we're doing, this is how we're supporting the community, and this is how you can help. It's a really easy buy-in. I can kind of understand already what I'll be doing if I was to join this opportunity. So really keeping it simple for our volunteers. So this is almost on that other ends. Like I said, it's almost like a classic job description. This is good, but sometimes scary. So for our volunteers reading this, they might think this looks like a 4-day-a-week paid role or something like that. So we want to make sure, I guess, one, we're looking at our volunteer roles. Is this kind of what we would expect a volunteer to do? And then when we're looking at how we describe what this role is, I think here again, we're looking for what is this actually doing? Why are you volunteering for this? If I'm a web developer here, I might be thinking, well, am I just working an extra day a week or something like that? But if you're kind of buying into the cause, buying into what is happening there, then on the flip side, you're thinking, well, how can I help? How can I use my skills to help this organization? So we're looking at finding that balance between providing the details, providing the description about what you're buying into, but not overwhelming a volunteer or saying, if you come into this will basically be a full-time job. You won't have a social life or that kind of thing. So you're looking at how can we get buy-in from the volunteer? How can we let them know that this is worth their time as well? Because here, this is for Refugees Welcome Australia, but you actually can't see the great work that they do. They do a lot of awesome work in the community, but you're not getting that from this. So how does my web developing skill impact that community? Here, this is one of the ones that I've really liked to see on the platform. So here, Linkmate, it's a long read. So they've included a video. I think that was really good, and that's something you can do on our platform as well. But they've talked through and really made it human. They're looking for these kind of people. It's not so much a job description with these. You have to have these skills and this experience, but it's really human-centric. This is the opportunity. This is what we're doing. This is why we exist. And I think that's really attractive to volunteers, and understanding that they're really the center of this volunteering experience. This is the experience that it will provide. So I think this is a really good example of what it looks like to really care about the volunteer as you're advertising an experience. And I think it was really supported by his post on LinkedIn as well. I just wanted to kind of contrast, like there's the vision and mission, which is very simple to the point. But what we're looking for is a bit more like this, how why you started this organization. For him, he was the founder. How is this organization important? And it's a really powerful story. It really shows the experience of him and why he started this. And people will read this and are inspired and want to help. And that kind of story is really what brought about Linkmate. And that's how we get from that story back to this overview of what this volunteering opportunity is. So we're trying to make those connections to the human, connections to what people are there for. I like to think of it as like the cost of compassion. So that it's a volunteered role. I think in the job description, it's normally like at the bottom, this is the salary, this is what you get out of it. So we're trying to replicate that, but with the importance of what you'll be contributing to, how you'll be supporting, and what you'll get out of this volunteering experience. And this is what we're bringing them into, the stages of a volunteer journey. I don't know if Raj, you wanted to take us through this volunteer journey, but that's what we're trying to get them to, these points. You're on mute, Raj, but whatever you're saying is probably excellent.
And I forgot what I said. Okay, yeah, this journey is very important. And before I go into the journey, I wanted to address a couple of questions that came through as well. One was from Eleanor about what are some of the ways to keep volunteers engaged in the organization in between work. We'll be covering a lot of that in the second session, but I'll address a bit of it in this journey. Bajinder from Asha Australia Foundation also asked how to attract volunteers and keep them. And also asked whether it's a lot of volunteers have asked to be paid, and is that okay? And honestly, volunteers are not meant to be paid. They're here to give their time for free, but it's not exactly free because you're trying to give them something back, but it's not in terms of cash, because once you give them cash, it's really they become a staff, right? You can talk about a pathway to employment, but be clear that, look, this is really a volunteering opportunity and we can build the experience so you can go out there and get more work, especially if they're from uni graduates and stuff like that. The other one was, I'm having a large growth in volunteers and the committee is having difficulty in keeping up with the responsibilities and how to engage with more members to become active. That was from Joy from Wildlife Rescue. So this is also something where we'll address a large part of it in the second section, but this one will give you a better idea as how to retain the volunteer. The first thing is to understand who your volunteer is, and the volunteer actually goes through a journey. So most of the volunteers that you're going to get, and this is about 75% of the volunteers out there right now who are volunteering with organizations, tend to be tourists. And we call them tourists because this is something they've not done before. This is something that is new to them. So what's happening is they're coming in and they're trying to figure out whether this experience is useful to them. And just like when you're going touring to a new country for the very first time, you're not sure what sort of experience to get out of this. And you're a bit out of your comfort zone. You're hoping this will be a good experience for you. And if it's a good experience, then I might do more of that sort of thing. So think of that as a volunteer coming in fresh. They have no idea what to expect. The first thing you got to do if they are a tourist is to figure out, look, I'm not going to overtask them with too many things to do and overload them, right? Because then the experience might not be good. The whole point with the tourists is to give them a good experience. Tell them, look, this is a great way to spend their time and there's a reward about, volunteering and stuff like that. Bear in mind that, what their comfort zone is, because if you're going to push them outside their comfort zone, they're not going to come back, right? And this is with any new person that you meet, right? If they come and join your community for the first time, they might be, unsure, unsettled, and it's your job to make sure they are settled and they're comfortable and they're having the right experience. Now, once they pass the tourist stage and go, hey, this is great, let me do a bit more. They become a traveler. And this is where you can give them a bit more responsibility. They're now happy to take on a bit more of a leadership role. They might be able to do more increased duties, which means they might be able to do more role-based stuff as well, where you say, look, they can be committing to you for a couple of hours a week for the whole year, right? The thing about a traveler is you also must understand they want to get more out of the volunteering experience than a tourist. They want to be shown that they can take on more responsibility. So introduce them more towards your management side as well, and figure out, okay, is there more that I can do with you? You know, the first time they come in, you might getting them to like stack chairs or collect tickets or do the simple tasks. But once they get to this stage, you want them to do a bit more, understand what the event's about, understand what you're trying to do. And then from there, they actually get to the guide. And that's where the aim is to get to the guide. The guide is someone who will die for the cause. Not literally, but it's someone who will give everything for the cause. He'll be your champion within the corporate. He'll be the person that goes, look, if you've got to run for a meeting and the event is not over, he can be tasked with, hey, these are the keys. Can you lock up after this and make sure everything's okay? He's taken on a role more like a staff. And that's where you want to get onto. Someone who behaves like he's a staff member, but is a volunteer. And you'll find, you know, these kind of volunteers will come in on the entire weekend. They'll take up a lot of their time and just come in and do whatever is needed. And what you'll find is they're perfect people to actually conduct your training and induction for your future volunteers as well, because they are the ones who believe in the cause so much, and they believe in volunteering because volunteering is something they see as a need for themselves because it's changed their lives. It's given them a different perspective on things, and they're getting so much more out of it than they're giving. And honestly, if you talk to a guy, they always say, look, I get more out of this experience than the beneficiaries are. And that's when you know I've reached basically, you know, the ideal state with a volunteer. Okay. Now in session 2, we'll be giving you a lot more ideas as to how to develop that relationship. Okay. Right now, I just want to get a poll as to how many of you have actually managed to develop the guides. Like, what percentage of the volunteers come to you as tourists or travelers or guides end up being guides? Have a think about it. Like, you know, what percentage have you managed to convert? %25%. That's really good. So the majority of you have managed to get 25% going to guides, and that is it is a fantastic percentage. What is out there right now in terms of the research that we've got is about 75% of the volunteers out there are tourists. About 5% are guides. So if you're getting more than 5%, then you're doing quite a good job. Yeah, about 20% are basically your travelers who are in between that stage kind of thing. So some of the things that we can do to make sure that we're pushing them onto that journey of becoming the guides. And this is where we get to the next slide. Whenever you get your volunteers, the first thing you got to do is make sure that you're setting realistic goals. Okay, the last thing you want is a volunteer coming in and going, great, I can't do this job. There's no way for me to hit this. The targets are just too high for me to even contemplate doing this role. When I say set guides and expectations, ask yourself these questions. Does the volunteer understand the mission and values of the not-for-profit organization? Does the volunteer understand the goals and objectives of the opportunity that they're trying to take up? You know, what kind of impact is that opportunity going to make onto the not-for-profit as well as to the beneficiaries? Are the goals provided to the volunteer in a smart way? And when I say smart, it means it has to be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. Okay, so that, yeah, spells out SMART. And don't worry about it. We'll be sending this video out to everyone, so you can take note or get that later. But yeah, it has to have those 5 different qualities so that as a volunteer, I know exactly what to expect. What is it that I'm being measured on? The attainable part is very important, because if it's not attainable, then there's no way I'm going to even take on this commitment, and I must feel comfortable doing it. Okay. What are the goals that all your volunteer opportunities are aligned to? And are the goals provided to the volunteer in their comfort zone? The comfort zone is very important. And that's something you got to figure out with your volunteer, but different volunteers are different. Some want to do more, some less. Some might want to do roles where they're happy to do public speaking or talk out there. Some, are more introverted and might not be comfortable talking to other people. So you got to figure out, what is it that, they are comfortable doing. Okay. And then the last thing is, do they understand which tasks are the priorities? Because, if you do not know what the priorities are, then they would not have any clue. Okay. Tip number 2 is you got to invest time in a volunteer training program. You can't just have a volunteer come in and straight into a project or straight into an opportunity and go, hey, great, go and do this, and that's it. So if you don't have a induction program or a training program, that's in itself can be a volunteering opportunity for someone in HR to come in and do that for you. Think of the policies around it. Think of what kind of structure you need to make sure that you can develop that volunteer for the long term. Don't look at them as a short-term goal. Think of them as a long-term thing. What you want is getting as many guides out there rather than tourists. And this is something that I think someone brought up about micro-volunteering. Micro-volunteering can be quite good in getting the number of volunteers up, but it has to be something where it's part of the project requires micro-volunteering. So micro-volunteering can be things like, giving out pamphlets in their free time, or going out and observing the wildlife and stuff like that, where they do not need training and they go out. But what we found is with micro-volunteering, a lot of them do not become guides. They tend to end up just being tourists throughout their volunteering journey. So it depends on whether micro-volunteering is something good in terms of the program that you're running rather than developing a volunteer. So when we look at a training program, some of the things you might want to look at is like, what is it that your not-for-profit gains from the creation and execution of this training program? And you got to look at that long-term development of staff or not staff, right? What is it that you want to teach your volunteers? How does it align with your organization's mission? And part of it is actually that awareness, right? Teaching them really about your cause, your beneficiaries. What is it that we are trying to change in the world? What is it that you are trying to make an impact on in the community? So don't look at it as, oh, I'm coming into an accounting project. Think of it as, I'm trying to make a difference in this world. How will you train the volunteers? What steps will be taken? Depending on the project, what is it that you need to give them to make sure that they can succeed? So even though I'm coming in to do an accounting project or a marketing project, I need to know what your goals and objectives are. What is it that you're trying to get out of it? How do I run the program currently? How do I do things? How do I, where the goals are? Where do I want to get to? So they know how to change things as well, according to what you need, right? The other thing you have to look into is, what kind of training materials you can develop, as well as what kind of budget you have to develop this as well. Because that's kind of important as well, because different budgets will give you different kind of training program, okay? And then how much time you're going to give in each training session as well. The third tip is be humanistic to your volunteers. Get to know them personally. Don't look at them as someone who's just coming in to do a task. Think of it as, I'm developing a relationship with this person. So it's same as when you get a new staff joining the organization, the first thing you try and do is get to know who they are. Part of, that is training and getting them to do the work that's required. But part of it is, I want to know who my colleagues are. I want to know what their hobbies are. Make sure they give you feedback about their role, what they've done, how their experience has been, so you can also develop that. Connect with your volunteers on social media. This is important not just to build that relationship, but also gets them to actually market and build awareness about your organization to their network as well. Okay. Make sure you thank your volunteers. Always remember that they are sacrificing their time to come here. And especially the tourists and travelers, they might not see the benefits. So they're thinking, look, I'm the one who's sacrificing everything to be here and to give up my time for you. So you've got to thank them and make sure they feel that they're being rewarded accordingly. Okay. One thing you can do is also introduce your volunteers to other volunteers, or have a community where they can share their experience and interests as well. And something you can do is actually host networking events between the volunteers and the staff, as well as the beneficiaries if it's possible. Okay. The fourth tip is about respecting your volunteers' values and their time. As I mentioned before, they're sacrificing their time to come and be with you. So you've got to respect their time and their commitment as well, right? And what the best ways to do it is always value the opinions of every volunteer. Listen to what they are saying at all times. Be sensitive to their emotions and what they're saying. Very important part of it, and I keep repeating this, is you got to know their comfort zone. Don't pressure them into crossing that comfort zone or doing something they're not comfortable doing and saying, look, this is important, we need you to do this. You got to see, look, are you comfortable doing it? Don't do it if you're not comfortable doing it, because then that's going to ruin your experience as well. Okay. Take time to learn something from your volunteers. You're going to find, most of them are coming in from a skilled perspective. So they might be able to change things within the organization to make it better. Not everything might be something you can do, because the way not-for-profits run, the way corporates run can be very different. But at the same time, they can come up with ideas to change the effectiveness of different things, or come up with systems that could improve the way that you're doing things and cut down the time and effort needed as well. Okay. And the most important bit is, understand the relationships, between the volunteers, the staff, and everyone else as well, and build that up. Okay. A few things that you need to consider about your volunteers' time is understand their time boundaries and their commitments as well. They are full-time workers, so you need to know when they are free and when they are not free. Respond to their requests and needs. Make sure the process for volunteering is easy as well. And go back to the SMART part as well. Make sure there's no confusion and wasted time because you don't have the right goals or processes in place. If they're commuting, make sure that it's necessary that they commute. If there's meetings that can be held without them coming to the not-for-profit, right now a lot of it's online, but when we do go back to face-to-face, and part of it is requiring them to come to the office, always think, do I really need them to come to the office, or can I do this on Zoom? And I think right now we're all experts on Zoom, although we're a bit zoomed out. But I think when it gets to face-to-face, we have to make sure that we maintain a balance between the two as well. And then the other thing is make sure that you're effectively communicating with them. Tip number 5, we're actually going to cover this in the third segment of this program, but it's all about recognition and rewarding of the volunteers. So you've got to set up a reward system for volunteers. You can host recognition events, when they work, provide food and coffee and tea and stuff like that. It's just a nice way of building that rapport with them as well. Feature your volunteer stories on your blogs and social media. The thing is, volunteers, when they come to your website or when they look for opportunities within your organization, also want to read up stories of different volunteers doing different things and how that has changed their lives. So if you've got stories about your volunteer journeys on your website and social media, that will attract more volunteers. On top of that, if you got stories about your volunteers are going to share that. And if they come from the corporate will want to share that as well. So it's also a big marketing tool that you can use. Again, the thank you notes, when they complete an opportunity, keep them involved in the not-for-profit, even after they completed the opportunity. I know someone said, they use Facebook, but the thing is, you can also invite them for events, invite them for networking stuff, have sessions with them, have chats with them. The whole thing is treat them like a human. So treat them as you would a friend, rather than just as a resource you call on when you need them. So even when you don't need them, try and be connected to them. Okay. The last tip that we have here is about being accessible to the volunteers. This is, making sure that they have a contact point within the organization, and if that contact point is not available, make sure there's a secondary contact point as well. And that way, whenever they need to raise a topic or are stuck in their project or need help in completing whatever you've assigned them to complete, there's someone that they can actually go and talk to. And that could also be part of that volunteer network. So it could be a guide that you also give as a contact to make sure that there's someone giving them the guidance, especially for a tourist. And that's with all these tips here. You got to also remember: is my volunteer a tourist, a traveler, or a guide? Because you also treat them differently, and you give them different responsibilities, and you give them that different opportunity depending on what they need as well. Okay. What you might do also is give them a designated shadow so they have assistance whenever they need to. And if you can have a support group of volunteers, or even a social media community where they can all be a part of. And I know you can even use the Communiteer platform to do that, because we also do form communities within the platform. Then this is something where you can actually get them to be more involved with the organization on a longer term basis, and you keep in touch with them even when they're not doing things with you. Okay. And I think, again, Will has got a few examples to share here.
Yeah, exactly. I think a key part of all of this engagement part is building community. And I think on the platform as well, what we're trying to do is create a space to build community and have clear volunteering opportunities. I think Eleanor from Seaside Scavengers is actually here today, but I wanted to shout out one of her opportunities. They're looking at a volunteer management program and looking over that. And they really they really broke up this role. What do we need to do? This is what we're going to do step by step. So the volunteer can kind of come in and see that there's a vision, see what they're doing, that kind of those SMART goals that we were talking about. They can look at what's going on and see, okay, this is how we're going to tackle this, and this is what we're looking to do. And same as well, Habitat for Humanity. It was a bit of a smaller task, only the two sections, but they've also gone and estimated how many hours they think will take on each section. So the volunteer kind of knows what they're getting themselves into. They know what's kind of expected of them. They're setting these clear goals and able to kind of plan out how they're going to implement that. So, I mean, this is what SMART goals and setting those expectations can look like. All the building community, there's personal relationships. I think that's really what our not-for-profits are specialized in. That's normally like the greatest part, those relationships you build. So it's kind of translating that to online. Can you do that? Can you do it between volunteering opportunities? And we'll try and explore that in the next event and in our recognition one as well. But we are running out of time. So,
there's a few questions from a few of you on how to engage with volunteers and how to bring in more volunteers and get them for free and engage with them. One thing is, get onto our platform. It is completely free for all not-for-profits to use. Basically, on the platform, what we'll be getting you to do is set up your own page. It's somewhat like social media and a project management software. So we'll teach you how to put out opportunities to get volunteers from the corporate sector in, build those relationships with the corporate sector. You have an access, okay, the number here is 1,900, but we're now at 2,300, I think, volunteers from the corporate sector. And these are all skilled volunteers who are happy to come in and take up projects like your marketing, your IT, and stuff like that. You can do project and role-based sort of things. And the last thing that we do is actually help you with your marketing as well. So we'll help you share those stories with the volunteers, the recognition programs that we have, you can also participate in. So if you want to get all that, and it's all for free, like I said, please do contact Kata, and Kata's here, I think.
Here. Hello, everyone.
Give a shout out, and you can book your free consultation. And like I said, this whole program is free for you to take part in, because what we do is we charge the corporates and the universities to be a part of it. And that, on top of that, is giving you the value, because the corporates are the ones who are paying for this whole program and wanting their volunteers to be a part of this program as well. So you're definitely going to get, a lot of skilled volunteers. And part of the marketing is our campaign, which I think Will is going to tell you a bit about. So if you're part of Pathway to Employment.
Yeah, so just wanted to shout out to those already part of this campaign. So we're just tackling SCG 4 and 8 at the moment. So just wanted to provide a quick update and let you know that, we've got over 90 not-for-profits in this section alone. We've had 6 corporates come on board and over 200 university students from a few different unis. So this is what we're doing at the moment. This is the kind of ways that we bring in not-for-profits. We try to have these campaigns once or twice a year, so, around certain causes, around the sustainable development goals. So that's what's going on at the moment. But as we do want to have a little bit of time for Q&A, so maybe you can hang around if you have any questions, but wanted to give a quick shout out for our next Connect event. It is really on how to engage volunteers. We tried to touch on that a little bit today, but obviously it deserves its own section. So there's a link there. You can even register for it today. We'll be running that in a few weeks' time, specifically on engaging volunteers and taking them on that journey that Raj talked through. So we would love to see you there. But it is 11 o'clock, so if you do have to duck off to another meeting or you're back to back today, then that's totally fine. But we'd love to see you at the next event. We'll be sending out the recording from today's event so you can catch up on anything you missed. If you weren't able to take enough notes, then that'll be sent in a follow-up email. Thanks, Lara. But we did promise a Q&A, so I don't know if we want to.
Yes, I mean, we're happy to hang around and answer any questions. Oh, you're going to pick up some donations, Heidi. That's fantastic.
I have a question about corporates, because we've had we do have management who wants to engage more with our corporates. But most of our roles are client support roles, so they are more ongoing roles, not project-based roles. Are most corporate roles kind of that project-based roles, because it's skill set? They're not like, there are a lot of organizations who are offering like a day or two of volunteering, but that doesn't really fit within our current volunteer roles. Is that kind of generally the ones that they're only available for that kind of short-term project-based?
No. So with the corporates, it's really a mixture of roles that you can target them for. So it can be project-based, it can be role-based, and they're quite happy. But also, think about the skill-based side of it as well. So when I talk about skill-based side, I talk about like things like marketing, for example, and you might have a marketing department, but they might want volunteers to come in to help you come up with the marketing strategy. And that can be a short-term project that they help out with the different departments within your organization. So if your organization has like IT, finance, marketing, HR and stuff like that, or if they don't have these kind of things, you can bring these people in on a short-term basis to talk about strategies and stuff like that. At the same time, you can also talk about the current role-based ones that you have and bring them into that, because some of the corporate volunteers, they do not want to do what they're good at in terms of their skills, and they want to come in and do something different. So it could be, if you're doing counseling or something like that, we could bring in, the student counselors, for example, who are in their 4th year or master's for counseling, and that can be a role-based thing as well. So depending on the opportunity that you have, we can kind of sort of see which corporates or universities to target. And then the other thing is just widen the scope of the volunteers that you can bring in, especially if you're talking about engaging with the corporate. Think about going back and talking to every department and saying, hey, do you need help? Do you need a mentor? Do you need someone to come in and strategize with you? And then do you need that long-term role-based person for that role as well?
I think that's one of the difficulties, is getting teams to consider what they can use volunteers for. And in that kind of client support, where case managers don't really, it's extra time for them to consider as well. But you gave me an idea, because we've got a lot of coordinators right now thinking about well-being activities online, how to support staff and team building. So that could be something from the corporate sector that might be able to offer some advice and suggestions on that. Yeah,
that's right. And like I said, with the role-based ones that you have, just come up with a structure. Are you on the platform already?
No, I was looking into it, and I think I had a kind of information from Kat a couple maybe a couple months. Last time I did one of your series, but I haven't followed through with that yet.
Cool. So when you get on, you'll get a free consultation. And that's when they can talk about the different ideas and try and bring in people from different departments as well, even your marketing and stuff like that. And then we can sort of see, okay, where the volunteers fit in and how we can collaborate with the corporates as well. And if it's your board that's pushing for the collaboration, one of the things you can do as well as an idea is bring in mentors for the board.
Yeah. There were some really great ideas that you guys have suggested, so I will put that back out to management to consider.
Cool. Any other questions out there?
Thank you so much.
No worries, Aurelia.
I have a question, Raj.
Yes.
You know, it's very difficult for staff, volunteers, or members to access Facebook, especially those so many social media, and then share stories. So distractive. And then no matter where you go, you need to get another layer of skills to know this platform. So my question is, how it's your platform can integrate all the functions, and then we can integrate, build in your platform into our website for the convenience of everyone. Click there and then bring everything up. That's wonderful, you know.
Okay, I wish we could do that, but yeah, we can't integrate all the social media on one platform. But what I would say is, with the social media, you probably need someone to come in and look at the strategy for your social media and figure out which is the best one to use, because honestly, you can't concentrate on every single social media out there. You got to figure out who your target market is and what your objectives are. And then from there, pick which social media is going to basically give you the best results. Honestly speaking, you actually need a full-time staff for each social media to make it really effective. And that's why sometimes what I say is like, come up with a marketing strategy first, where you figure out, okay, what is it that I need from the social media? What is the target market? What's the objectives? And it could be just, look, let me focus on Facebook this year and make that the best that it can be. And part of it could be, look, let me bring on a role-based person just for Facebook to help out once a week, and that could help you out. The other thing that we do is we do help out in terms of the recognition of the volunteers, and we can help you out in terms of getting those stories out. So whenever you have the volunteers on our platform and stuff like that, we can try and get something where we get marketing to do a joint social media blast between the corporate, the volunteer, us, and yourself. And you know, when more of us share the same story, the algorithm of social media also takes a big hit, and then your awareness and reach gets a lot bigger as well. So yeah, that's something. Have you already had your consultation with us, or?
Not yet.
Okay, so when you have the consultation, this is something and discuss with the consultant as well, how to make use of the social media, which is the target market, and then they can come up with a project where they bring in a couple of people in the corporate sector to discuss your marketing strategy, and then maybe try and get a role-based person to just help you out on 1 or 2 different social media channels.
Yep. Thank you so much. Very helpful. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, I will follow
up. The other
up
thing you can think of as well is bring in a content developer as a volunteer, and then write the stories out for you as well.
Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you, Raj.
No worries, Ida. Okay, any other questions?
I've got a question. Mark Peachy from ACT Wildlife. It was suggested that a volunteer is recruited via the same way as a staff member, which means interviewing individuals. We're sort of we don't do that. We have an induction or an information session basically, and then whoever wants to help lets us know. We follow up with emails, but yeah, we don't have sort of a formal interview. Should we be working towards that?
If you have the resources for it, and it depends on
not really. not
Yeah,
really.
if you don't
but-
have the resources for it, then I would say you don't have to, but you might want to put like a selection criteria and make sure the volunteers fulfill that criteria.
Mhm.
So what you might want is like a list of things that the volunteer should tick and say, look, yes, I fulfill this, and therefore I'm applying for this opportunity.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's probably a good idea. Yeah. The hard thing is, you know, we've got we're busy looking after animals all the time that are injured or orphaned, and everyone, all our management people are wildlife carers as well. So we're always busy, and no one or two people together would be able to handle all those volunteers. So
yeah,
we take everybody who says they want to help, and then sometimes it's a disaster.
yeah. So that's why you need the criteria, and you need to make sure the right person is coming along. What I would suggest is if you were to come up with a HR project, bring in a HR person to say, look, I need to figure out how to recruit the volunteers and how to induce them, given the resources that I have. I always say, given the resources that I have, because there's an ideal situation, given that you've got ample resources, but most of us do not have that, right? So we've got to say, look, given the resources that we have, what is it that I can do to make sure that I get the right volunteers and the right opportunities and the right engagement with the volunteer?
Thank you, Raj. That's great.
No worries, Mark. Any other questions? I see a lot of people still hanging around, so I'm expecting a few more questions. It's a case of people happy to hang around and get other people to ask questions and listen to it. Okay, if there's no more questions, then we'll sort of put this to a close, but I hope you guys come to the next session, because the next session really talks about the engagement between and how to build that relationship with the volunteers. And we got some good principles that we'll be sharing there as well. So thank you all for attending today. I know there's been a change in the timing and all that, but it was good to see so many nice, good, familiar faces, and I hope to see you at the next one. See you all.